I was an office worker who was reborn into another world. Everything was weightless, soundless. Still, Rin didn't know if minutes or hours had passed. Maybe time didn't exist here. There was no pain anymore, no fatigue, just the endless quiet of non-existence. And then, like a ripple across still water, a soft melody echoed. It wasn't a song he remembered hearing. It wasn't in Japanese or any language he recognized, but somehow it felt familiar, like something buried deep in a childhood dream. A lullaby heard in a past life, or perhaps one that had yet to be sung. The melody wrapped around him, guiding him gently through the dark. Resonance confirmed. Soul memory is active. Emotion frequency, regret, hope, longing, a signing harmonized vessel. Suddenly, more windows began appearing in his field of vision. Ethereal, glowing screens like blue glass hanging in midair. Class compatibility analysis. Standard class candidates. Warrior, 7%. Mage, 16%. Rogue, 5%. Cleric, 22%. Bard, 98% recommended. Hidden class compatibility. Echo Weaver, 63% locked. Soul Cantor, 41%. Chosen of the Aria, 37%. You will be reborn in a world defined by song, spirit, and strength. Class, bar assigned. Hidden class slot detected but sealed. You are granted the passive trait, reverberating soul. Rin tried to process it all, but it was like reading a foreign language after pulling an all-nighter, blurred, confusing, and oddly dreamlike. A bard? Like in games, singing and dancing while others do the fighting. He frowned. It felt too whimsical for someone like him. Rin sat in his cramped apartment years ago, plucking strings on a beat-up acoustic guitar. He was smiling, genuinely. It was the day before he quit his music club in college to take a business internship. Music won't pay the bills, his father had said. Grow up. So he had, and it had killed him. Suddenly, a stronger voice echoed through the void. Not the system, not robotic. It was warm, calming, feminine. Kazuki-Ren, in your past life, your voice was drowned by the weight of the world. But in this one, your voice can shape fate. It can heal, inspire, protect. Do you wish to live again, not just exist? Ren hesitated. Then, yes. Then sing. Even if the world turns away, sing. A surge of light engulfed him. The screens vanished. A wind that didn't exist howled past his ears. He felt his body twist and reform, not painfully, but powerfully, like being rewritten into something new. His final thoughts before blacking out were a whisper. Let me do it right this time. Warmth, sunlight, the scent of grass. Ren's eyes fluttered open. The sky above him was a rich, vibrant blue. Not the smoggy haze of Tokyo, but a pure, deep sky that looked like it belonged in a painting. Puffy white clouds drifted slowly across the expanse. Birdsong filled the air. He sat up with a gasp, his hand instinctively reaching for his phone. But there was no phone. Instead, his hands were smooth, young. No carpal tunnel aches, no keyboard calluses. His arms were thinner, and his clothes, not his office uniform. A simple white shirt, brown pants, leather boots, a small satchel. He stumbled to his feet and looked around. He was in a wide meadow near a dirt path, bordered by dense trees and flowers that shimmered faintly in the sunlight. A small village could be seen in the distance, smoke rising gently from stone chimneys. And then, ding! A glowing blue screen appeared before his eyes with a soft chime. Status panel. Name, Rin Kazuki. Race, human. Age, 16. Class, Bard. Level 1. HP, 50 of 50. MP, 100 out of 100. Strength, 6. Dexterity, 10. Endurance, 8. Charisma, 14. Magic affinity, 12. Luck, 7. Skills. Humming heal eye, heal minor wounds with a sustained tune. Voice projection. Extend a range of spoken or sung spells. Song recall. Memorize and replay melodies perfectly. Passive trait. Reverberating soul. You retain emotional echoes from your past life. Your songs carry meaning that transcends normal magic. Hidden class locked. He blinked. Then read it again. And again. Okay, he whispered. Either I'm in a coma, or this is real. The weight of what just happened didn't hit him all at once. It crept in slowly, like waking up from a dream you wanted to be real, only to realize it was. He fell to his knees. I died. That really happened. My life, all of it gone. That office. The deadlines. The people I smiled at even when I hated myself. They're all back there, and I'll never go back. But this isn't a second chance to be some all-powerful hero. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a chosen one. I'm a bard. A bard. And maybe that's enough. A soft breeze blew through the meadow. Somewhere nearby, a child's laughter rang out. A village bell tolled once. Rin stood up, his hand clutching the strap of his satchel. All right, new world. Let's see what kind of song you've got. The village smelled like warm bread, blooming flowers, and open sky. Rin stood in the center of the narrow dirt road, staring in awe. The buildings were timber-framed with mossy stone foundations. Flower boxes sat beneath wooden windows. Chickens strutted freely through open gates, and kids dashed between trees with sticks and pretend swords. It felt like he had stepped into the warm pages of a storybook. Well, he murmured, adjusting his satchel, this is definitely not Tokyo. A voice called out behind him. You there? New face. Ren turned just in time to see a kind-looking woman in her late 50s, wiping flour from her hands as she stepped out of a bakery. You lost, boy. Ren bowed slightly, instinctively. Kind of. I just woke up. Over in the meadow. She blinked, then smiled knowingly. Another echo-born, then. You poor thing. Come in. You must be starving. Over a warm meal of fresh rolls, cheese, and soup, Ren learned that he was in the village of Noryun, a quiet farming outpost nestled between two merchant roads. Echo-born, people who arrived with strange magic and stranger memories, weren't common, but they weren't unheard of. You'll want to register at the guild hall, she said, handing him a small parchment map. They'll help you figure out your place. Thank you, Ren said sincerely, bowing again. You've been so kind. The woman laughed. You look like someone who's forgotten how to rest. Maybe this world will teach you how again. The guild hall was a modest two-story structure with wooden beams and a large board of parchment requests nailed to one wall. Inside, Ren was greeted by a cheerful half-dwarf receptionist who handed him a guild stone. Let's sync you up, lad. Just place your hand on the stone and concentrate. Ren did as told. The stone glowed, and his status panel appeared again, this time more complete. Receipt status panel. Name, Ren Kazuki. Class Bard. Level 1. HP, 50 of 50. MP, 100 out of 100. Stats. Strength, 6. Dexterity, 10. Endurance, 8. Charisma, 14. Magic Affinity, 12. Luck, 7. Skills. Humming Heal Eye. Voice Projection. Song Recall. Resonant Sight. New. Briefly perceive emotional states in others. Passives. Reverberating Soul. Hidden Class. Guild ID. Novice Rank. Echo-born Exemption. Looks like you're singing type. Rare that one of your kind ends up out here. The dwarf winked. Try not to charm the sheep. Ren laughed nervously. On his way out, Ren spotted someone standing beneath a lone tree just outside the guild gate. A girl, perhaps his age, with silver blonde hair tied in a high braid, was reading from a parchment scroll while humming softly. A faint glow danced around her fingers. Curious, Ren approached. Is that magic? She didn't look up. Aria casting. Sound-based augmentation. You're echo-born. He nodded. Then you'll need friends, she said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were a stormy gray. This world doesn't reward solos. My name is Lyra. He hesitated, then offered a hand. Run. They shook hands. There was a long pause, something unsaid lingering between them. Lyra looked away first. If you're staying in Noryun, watch the forest near the eastern ridge. It's been strange lately. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Ren stared after her, something unspoken echoing in the back of his mind. That night, Ren sat on the small bed in the guild dorms, staring out the window at a sky full of stars. He pulled out a piece of parchment and began scribbling lyrics. This is a world that sings in silence, a place of echoes and second chances. He stopped, biting his lip. In my last life, I wrote reports. Now, I want to write songs again. Morning came gently to Noryun village, wrapped in mist and birdsong. Rin awoke to golden sunlight filtering through the shutters of the guild dorm. For the first time he couldn't remember how long he'd slept without an alarm clock. No calendar reminders. Number 3 a.m. pings from his manager. Just stillness. He sat up slowly, stretching with a soft groan. Everything felt sore in a good way, like his body was alive instead of just functioning. So this is what a fresh start feels like. He dressed in his simple linen shirt and boots, strapped on a satchel, and headed downstairs to the village square. The air smelled of dew, hay, and the faint scent of something baking. On the way to the guild, he passed a familiar figure sitting on a fence near the edge of town. Lyra was humming again, a simple, almost melancholy melody. Rin approached, offering a wave. "Morning." She gave him a glance, nodding politely. "You slept. You say that like it's rare." "It is, for Echoborn." She glanced at him fully now. "I can tell. You carry fatigue in your posture, like someone used to carrying more than they should." He gave a tired smile. "Guess that hasn't changed." She tilted her head. "Why are you here, really?" Rin blinked. "You mean in this world?" She nodded. He thought for a moment, then looked at the rising sun. "I used to wake up dreading the day. I don't want to live like that anymore. If this is a second chance, I want to live without resenting the sunrise. In my old life, I thought the only way to matter was to be useful. I spent years grinding myself down for companies that didn't know my name. I forgot what it meant to create, to feel proud of something. Music used to be that for me. I gave it up because it wouldn't pay the rent. But now, I'm in a world where music is magic. Maybe this is the universe giving me a do-over. A chance to find my voice again. To use it to do more than survive." Lyra didn't speak for a long time. Then softly she said, "If that's true, then your voice might matter more than you think." She handed him a folded note. "Meet me at the south pasture before sunset. I want to test something." Without another word, she hopped down and walked off. Rin decided to take a walk and learn more about the village. It wasn't long before he saw a commotion near the eastern ridge. A group of farmers were gathered around a large wounded creature. A young shepherd boy was crying near a bleeding sheep, its side clawed open. The boy's mother was trying to calm him. "Wild dogs," one man muttered, "or something worse. We can't keep losing livestock. They'll starve if this keeps up." Rin stepped closer. The sight of the child sobbing over the injured animal stirred something in him. A deep ache. A memory. He was 5, holding his first hamster in a shoebox. It had died. His mother had held him as he cried, singing a lullaby he barely remembered now. He had wished he could bring it back, wished his tears were enough. He stepped forward slowly. "Can I try something?" The crowd looked at him, doubtful. "You a healer?" one asked. "Sort of," Rin said. "I'm a bard." "Bard? What's he gonna do, sing at it?" A few chuckles. But Rin knelt beside the creature. The boy looked at him through tears. "Please," Rin whispered. "Let this work." He closed his eyes. He didn't know the words. He didn't know the notes. But he let the melody come. A soft hum. Wordless. Pure. His voice trembled at first, but steadied. A low, warm resonance, rising gently in tone and emotion. The sheep stirred. The bleeding slowed. Golden light pulsed from his hands, soft and gentle, like candlelight. The wound sealed slightly, not fully healed, but enough to stop the worst of the damage. The boy gasped. It's okay." The crowd went silent. Ding. Skill activated. Humming Heal Eye has leveled up. New skill unlocked. Harmony Pulse. Send a wave of emotional resonance that soothes pain and restores minor injuries in a radius. Ren exhaled, his voice fading. He stood shakily. His legs were weak. His breath caught in his throat. But inside, something bloomed. "I can do something. With just my voice. I made a difference." The crowd murmured. Their mockery had vanished. One of the older women stepped forward. "That was real magic." Another nodded. "We could use someone like you at the next healing rotation." The shepherd boy threw his arms around Ren. "Thank you, Mr. Bard." Ren smiled, eyes stinging a little. "You're welcome." At sunset, Ren met Lyra at the pasture. "I heard what happened," she said. "You really healed something." "I didn't know I could," he admitted. She stepped closer, pulling a scroll from her satchel. "This is an aria spell. It requires vocal harmonization, but I'm only one voice. I want to try it with you." He blinked. "Like a duet." "Sort of. Your voice resonates. Mind channels. Together, We might access a harmonic we couldn't alone. They stood side by side. She counted them in. Together, they began to sing. Different melodies, intertwined like silk threads. Her voice carried structure, arcane, precise. His carried emotion, soft, powerful. The air shimmered. Grass around them glowed faintly. The wind stirred, warm and alive. Then, a spark of light shot into the sky. A brief pulse that vanished, but left the entire meadow brighter somehow. Ding! New skill learned. Fusion duet. Aria of bloom. When sung with an aria mage, this spell accelerates plant growth, enhances healing properties, and boosts mood. They stood in silence. Then Lyra, wide-eyed, whispered, "You're not just a bard. There's something else inside you." Rin didn't answer. He was still listening. To the echoes in the air. To the world itself. And for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't afraid of what he'd hear. It started with the fog. Thick and unnatural. It rolled into Norian from the eastern forest just before dawn. By the time the sun rose, the fields were drowned in pale white, and the birds had gone silent. Rin stood outside the guild hall, hands trembling slightly as he held a notice parchment. Request for assistance. Unusual monster sightings along the East Ridge. Livestock missing. Aid requested for investigation. The village was tense. Farmers were gathering pitchforks and torches. The guards, only 3 of them, were arming themselves with rusted spears. Rin turned to Lyra, who had read the notice over his shoulder. "They're not trained for this," he said. She nodded. "That's why we're going." Rin, Lyra, and 2 local militia made their way through the eastern path. The mist was so thick it swallowed sound. Even Rin's voice felt muffled. "Visibility's dead," muttered one of the militia. "It's like something's pulling the fog in." "I can't feel any natural flow," Lyra whispered, her fingers glowing faintly as she scanned the air. Then a growl. "Low. Wet. Wrong." Rin turned, heart pounding. A flash of movement. Then the scream. Out of the mist lunged a feral creature, green-skinned, hunched, with twisted limbs and too many teeth. It looked like a goblin, but corrupted, with purple veins and eyes glowing white. It tackled one of the militia to the ground. Rin reacted instinctively. "Hey!" he shouted. Not just a scream, but a chord. His voice pulsed with magic, empowered by panic and purpose. Skill activated. The goblin flinched, stunned for a second. Rin stepped forward, his hand on his chest, heart thundering. He began to hum, slowly, carefully, channeling, humming heal toward the wounded guard. Lyra moved beside him, chanting a sharp aria spell that turned to flame. It blasted another goblin coming from the side. "More incoming," she called. "We're surrounded." 3 more creatures appeared, crawling out of the mist like nightmares. One of them leapt toward Rin, and this time, he couldn't sing fast enough. His legs froze. Too fast. Too much. "You're not a fighter. You're just a bard." The creature lunged, and then was impaled mid-air by a thrown dagger. A cloaked figure appeared from the fog, spinning 2 short blades and grinning like a devil. "Looks like you could use a hand." Kale, dressed in mismatched armor and a crooked smile, danced through the fog like it was his home. His blades found targets with deadly precision, and he moved like someone who didn't believe in getting hit. "Who the hell?" Rin started. "No time for introductions," Kale quipped. "You sing, right? Sing. Loud. I'll buy you the space." Rin took a breath and sang. He didn't think about lyrics. They came naturally. "Shatter fear and find your flame. Stand your ground. No one's to blame. In the storm, a steady call. I won't let my allies fall." Golden energy rippled from his chest in waves. The melody wasn't perfect, but it meant something. His magic pulsed with every beat of his heart. New skill. Inspiring Versailles, buff nearby allies' speed and morale. Kale laughed as the energy wrapped around him. Now that's more like it. But it wasn't enough. The last goblin leapt over Kale's head, claws outstretched, aiming straight for Rin. Time slowed. He remembered his old office cubicle. The silence. The suffocation. He remembered watching coworkers get promoted while he stayed behind. He remembered dying without screaming. Not this time. The mist vibrated as Rin shouted, his voice not singing, but roaring. "I'm not powerless anymore." His body flared with sound and light. The goblin froze midair, suspended in a sphere of vibrating energy, before exploding in a harmless pulse of harmonic shock. Class unlocked. Echo Weaver, hidden class rare. You are a bard who weaves the echoes of emotion, memory, and intent into tangible magic. Your voice does more than enchant, it binds and breaks. New skills unlocked. Resonant Barrier, a shield formed from harmonized magic. Echo Pulse, repeats a spell cast within the last 10 seconds at half power. Song of the Soul, empowers magic based on emotional intensity. The fog began to retreat, leaving behind scorched earth and silence. One of the militia groaned, waking with Lyra's healing spell still shimmering around him. Kale stood over a goblin corpse, wiping his blade. Well, that was dramatic. Rin fell to one knee, breathing hard. Lyra, help him up. That was impossible. You unlocked a hidden class. He looked at his hands. They were glowing faintly with gold sparkles that drifted off into the air like fireflies. I don't know what this is, he said quietly, but I think it's only just begun. The fog was gone. Noryun's eastern ridge lay quiet, but the silence didn't bring peace. It felt watchful, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Rin sat on a moss-covered stone near the road, arms resting on his knees. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the lingering aftershocks of power. His magic still hummed under his skin like the fading reverberation of a struck bell. Across from him, Lyra knelt beside the wounded militia, finishing a healing chant. Kale stood a few feet away, tossing a dagger into the air and catching it absently, his eyes fixed on Rin. So, Kale said at last, you gonna explain how you sang a goblin into confetti, or are we just going to pretend that didn't happen? Rin blinked, his heart still racing. He focused on his interface, and it answered his call with a soft chime. Status panel. Name, Rin Kazuki. Race, human, Echoborn. Class, Echo Weaver, hidden class. Level 5. HP, 75 out of 75. MP, 210 of 220. Stats, Strength, 7. Dexterity, 11. Endurance, 10. Charisma, 18. Magic Affinity, 16. Luck, 9. Skills, Humming Heal, 2. Voice Projection, Resonant Sight, Harmony Pulse, Inspiring Versi, Resonant Barrier. Create a shield of layered sound magic. Echo Pulse, replay your last spell at half power. Song of the Soul, empower magic based on emotion. Passives, Reverberating Soul, Eternal Echo. Your spells leave behind lingering emotional traces, strengthening memory-based magic. Titles, Echo Born, Hidden Voice, Undiscovered Effect. He read through the panel slowly, taking it in like reading a letter from a long-lost friend. This wasn't just a list of powers. It was a reflection of who he was becoming. A bard whose voice didn't just heal or inspire. It shaped the battlefield through resonance and memory. I spent years pushing papers for people who never listened. My voice didn't matter back then. It was background noise. But now it's different. My voice reaches people, changes things. It carries weight, meaning. It's like the world is listening, finally. But that also means I can't just sing for myself anymore. If this power can affect lives, then I can't afford to waste it. Kel flopped down beside him and whistled low. You've got something rare. Not just flashy, real rare. That goblin didn't even touch you. You stunned it midair. I've seen nobles spend years trying to learn that kind of spell control. I didn't do it on purpose, Rin admitted. That's what makes it terrifying. Kale grinned. You're not even trying yet. Lyra approached, quiet but thoughtful. That spell at the end, she said, it didn't follow normal bardic structures. It wasn't a chant or an aria. It was raw emotional resonance. Rin nodded. I wasn't even thinking about spells. I was just thinking, no more. I didn't want to freeze up again. She sat beside him, gaze soft. You resonate deeply. That's rare. Echo weavers were rumored to be myth. Mages who could cast by connecting to the emotional threads of others. Their songs weren't just spells. They were stories. Rin looked down at his hands. I'm not a hero. No, she said. You're something rarer. You're a listener. Most mages force magic into the world. You ask it to respond. Back in the village square, the injured militia were recovering. The townsfolk had gathered near the guild hall, whispering. When Run, Kale, and Lyra returned. They were met with applause, shy at first, then heartfelt. The baker from before stepped forward. You saved our fields, our livestock, maybe even our lives. The village chief, an old man with a cane and a hawk-like gaze, stepped forward. Rin Kazuki, echo-born or not, you've proven yourself. We can't force you to stay, but Norien could use someone like you, even just for a while. Rin felt a lump in his throat. In his old life, no one had ever asked him to stay. He was just a cog, replaceable. Here, he was needed. He looked at Lyra, then at Kale, then at the villagers, all watching him, not with worship, but with hope. In the world I came from, I was invisible. I worked until I collapsed, and no one even knew my name. Here, I sang once, and it made a difference. I'm not strong. I'm not brave. But maybe I don't need to be. Maybe I just need to keep singing. If my voice can help someone sleep easier, if I can stop just one more monster from hurting a child, then I'll sing until the world no longer echoes with pain. He stepped forward and bowed his head. I'll stay, as long as I'm needed. The villagers cheered. Later that evening, Kale flipped a coin and caught it. So, you're sticking around. Time to stop looking like a winded librarian every time you cast a spell. Rin laughed. You offering to train me? Kale smirked. Sort of, but not alone. From behind the inn came the sound of humming. A rich baritone. Dramatic. Over the top. And then, did someone say training? Enter Maestro Ven, wearing a tattered cloak covered in musical notes, and wielding a lute strapped like a great sword. Ven bowed deeply. I am Maestro Ven, the blade cantor, master of magic and melody, and humble teacher of the forgotten art of vocal combat. You, my bright-eyed echo-born, are my next student. Rin blinked. What is happening right now? Lyra just groaned and covered her face. Oh gods, not him. Kale laughed. You're in for it now. Rin stood atop the small hill just north of Norien, watching the morning sun melt the last of the mist from the fields below. The scent of damp grass and lavender filled the air. He was supposed to leave today. The plan had been simple. Meet a merchant, catch a caravan to the next town, and begin exploring this new world. But nothing about this world, or his role in it, had turned out simple. Down below, the village was alive again. Children played near the shrine. Farmers prepared new fencing to protect their fields. A group of villagers practiced with wooden spears, coached by a young militia woman. Rin smiled. You look like someone trying to say goodbye to a place he's already decided to stay in, came a familiar voice. Kale stepped beside him, tossing an apple in the air. I should go, Rin muttered. But you won't. No, Rin admitted. I don't think I can. Lesson 1. Maestro Ven bellowed, throwing his arms out wide as the morning wind whipped his cloak. Magic without rhythm is barbarism. Rin blinked as a lute was tossed into his arms. Weapons dull, spells fade, but a melody stays in the heart forever. Your voice is not a tool, my dear Rin. It is a symphony waiting to be unleashed. Kale leaned toward Lyra. I give him 5 minutes before he runs. Lyra raised an eyebrow. I'm betting 3. Despite the theatrics, Ven's lessons were intense and surprisingly effective. Each morning, Rin learned vocal projection through controlled breathing, magical harmony resonance, and how to match his mana flow to tempo. Afternoons were spent dueling with rhythm-based casting, using call-and-response spells to build combo effects. Evenings were for reflection, songwriting, meditation. One afternoon, the village chief called for Rin. We've received word, the old man said, laying out a tattered map. The trade route from Ehrenfell's capital has been disrupted. No supplies for weeks. Scouts we sent didn't return. He looked at Rin, weary but firm. You've shown us you can protect, lead, and inspire. We don't have soldiers. We have you. Will you help? Rin didn't answer right away. I came here by accident. I wasn't supposed to matter. But this place, these people, they believe in me. They're not just surviving. They're rebuilding. And they're asking me to help. Not because I'm the strongest, but because I listen. Because I care. And maybe that's the only kind of hero I ever wanted to be. He placed his hand on the map. I'll go. With Lyra and Kale. The chief nodded. You'll leave in 3 days. The next few days were a blur of packing supplies, sharpening blades, and copying song scrolls. Rin finalized his first travel hymn, a simple melody to steady nerves during long marches. Kale showed Run how to walk silently through forests, set traps, and hide provisions. Lyra taught him how to read the wind and listen to mana flows through the trees. And Maestro Vin gave him a single enchanted note. "Play this if you're about to die dramatically," Vin said with a wink. "It'll buy you exactly 5 seconds of something chaotic." On the morning of their departure, the village gathered to see them off. The baker handed Rin a pack of warm rolls. The shepherd boy from before hugged his leg and said, "Come back, okay?" Rin smiled and knelt beside him. "I'll bring back a new song just for you." Then, with Lyra at his side and Kale walking a few steps ahead, Rin took his first step toward the unknown. He didn't know what lay beyond the border hills. But he knew this time. He was walking forward with purpose, and he was bringing his voice with him. The road east was quiet, too quiet. Rin walked at the center of the small party, the sun filtering through the dense canopy above them. Trees loomed on either side of the dirt path, their leaves whispering secrets only the wind could hear. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. "We're being watched," Kale muttered from the front. 3 times now. Birds went silent right before we passed a thicket. "I feel it too," Lyra said, her tone focused but calm. "The mana flows, uneven, like it's being pulled." Rin didn't say anything, but his fingers brushed the edge of his new lute, gifted by Maestro Vin. He could feel a faint vibration in the strings, like a tuning fork that hadn't quite stilled. They weren't traveling alone. 3 hours ago, a friendly young man named Taryn had stumbled out of the woods, limping and clutching a half-torn map. "Thank the stars," he cried. "Bandits hit my caravan. Took everything. Please, I just want to get to Outpost Gorel." He was charming. Too charming, Kale had said later. But his arm was bandaged, and his story checked out, at least on the surface. Taryn now walked beside Run, chatting between pain steps. "You're really an echo weaver?" he asked, eyes wide with awe. "That's insane. My uncle used to tell stories about one, some bard who fought off a whole beast horde with a single song." Rin laughed softly. "I'm not that dramatic," Kale muttered, yet. Receipt, status panel. Name, Rin Kazuki. Class, Echo Weaver, hidden class. Level 5. HP, 7575 MP. 210/220. Signature song, Ballad of the Unbroken. Inactive, can be awakened under pressure. New trait active, harmonic awareness. You sense emotional disturbances nearby. Note, emotional currents are unstable within a 300-meter radius. Rin's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer to Lyra, lowering his voice. "Something's wrong." The passive, harmonic awareness. "It's spiking." Lyra's hands slid toward her satchel. "Mine too. I feel fear and guilt. From somewhere close." The world snapped. 5 bolts whistled from the trees. Kale spun, knocking one away with a flick of his dagger. "Ambush." Taryn dropped his cane. His limp vanished. He smiled. "I really hate doing this," he said, drawing 2 hidden short blades from his boots. "But orders are orders." The word rang through Ren's mind like a church bell cracked in half. He felt it. The guilt in Taryn's aura, masked under forced smiles. The fear, buried beneath a practiced grin. The betrayal wasn't personal. It was professional. He didn't even hesitate. "How many times has he done this?" "Kale, you little." "Lyra, he's not alone." Figures in white masks dropped from the trees, moving in perfect sync. Their movements were too smooth, no emotion, no hesitation. Each held a blade with runes that pulsed in jagged, lifeless patterns. "Silence them," said one masked figure, voice glitching with static. "Emotion. Weakness. Break the resonance." Rin stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding. They weren't just thugs. These were trained suppressors, resonance assassins. Taryn rushed forward. Kale intercepted him mid-charge, their blades sparking. Lyra raised a glowing shield, just in time to block a soundless shockwave from one of the masked attackers. "They're targeting our emotions," Rin realized. "They're trying to suppress the flow, cut off our magic." He gritted his teeth and began to sing. "Blades may fall and songs may fade, but still we fight, unafraid. In every note, our names remain, unbroken voices through the pain." Combat effect. Allies resist silence, fear, and suppression. MP Regan increased for 30 seconds. Emotional damage have for all allies. Kale shouted, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Rin didn't stop. His voice grew louder, fuller, carrying beyond words. Every note shook the air, not as attack, but as defiance. Lyra followed up with an aria blast that shattered one of the mask's runes, forcing the figure to retreat. Rin focused on Terran. He began to sing a different tune, quieter, mournful. You wear the mask and play the part. But echoes don't lie to the heart. Terran staggered mid-swing. How do you? Rin didn't answer. He stepped closer, voice unwavering. You don't want to do this. For just a second, Terran's expression faltered. You think I have a choice? He whispered, barely audible. Then he lunged again. Rin flinched, but Kale stepped between them, slamming Terran to the ground and disarming him with brutal precision. The silenced chorus vanished as swiftly as they'd come, retreating into the trees when the rhythm broke. Kale stood over Terran, blade at the ready. I should kill him. Rin's voice was quiet. No, he tried to kill us. Rin knelt beside Terran, who was clutching his side, breath ragged. You were afraid, Rin said. You joined them out of fear. Terran laughed weakly. That's the world, isn't it? You sing, or you get silenced. Rin met his eyes. Then I'll sing louder. This world is beautiful, but it's also broken. People like Terran are just echoes, distorted by fear, twisted by power. I'm not here to fix everything, but I will be a voice that doesn't give in. Not for power, not for glory, but because someone has to keep the music alive. As night fell, Lyra examined the broken mask they had taken from one of the attackers. The inside was etched with the emblem of a noble house. Hers. The fire crackled in their temporary campsite, tucked against a moss-covered rock outcrop beneath the tall boughs of the mist-briar wood. Rin stared into the flames, barely hearing the rustle of Kale sharpening his daggers or the occasional crack of a twig beyond the perimeter. The events of the day hadn't stopped spinning in his mind. Terran's betrayal, the masked attackers, the twisted melodies of the silenced chorus, and Lyra. She hadn't spoken since she saw the noble crest inside the mask. She sat apart from the others, alone, her aria scrolls spread out beside her like a quiet shield. Kale was the first to speak. We need to talk about that, Mark. Lyra didn't look up. Is it yours? He asked, voice flat. She flinched. I recognize it, she said quietly. It's from House Ellenhart. Rin turned to her slowly. Your family. She nodded. Kale scoffed. So you're not just some runaway aria student. You're what? A noble. Lyra finally looked at him, eyes cold. Was. Until they branded my brother a traitor for refusing to weaponize forbidden resonance magic, and then killed him for it. He believed emotion wasn't something to manipulate. It was something to protect. But that went against the Council's agenda. They wanted power without consequence. Precision spells. Mechanized resonance. No mess. No feelings. My brother said it was murder wearing a symphony's mask. I ran. Took his research and burned my crest. I've been hunted ever since. And now they've joined the Silence Chorus, because that faction is exactly what the nobility has wanted all along. A world without echo, without choice. Rin felt the words like a melody of mourning, not just for Lyra's past, but for what Elydria was becoming. He stood and crossed the fire toward her. Why didn't you tell us? Because if you knew, she whispered, you'd never trust me. Rin offered her his hand. I trust you. Kale grunted. That makes one of us. But he didn't argue further. As they prepared to sleep, the air shifted. A faint pressure wrapped around Ren's chest. Not pain, but dissonance. The atmosphere thickened, like trying to breathe underwater. Suddenly, Lyra gasped. I feel it too, she said. Mana's breaking, like a string pulled too tight. They ran to the edge of camp. Just beyond the tree-line, where Terran had tried to escape, a pale shimmer hovered midair, like cracked glass in the sky, pulsing with soft purple light. A harmonic fracture. Lyra's voice trembled. These only appear when resonance has been corrupted violently, like during an emotional betrayal or forced suppression. Kale muttered. So Terran's breakdown tore the world a little. Rin approached the fracture. As he neared, the air filled with faint voices, echoes of Terran's final thoughts. Sing or be silenced. I didn't want to hurt them. They'll kill me if I fail. Rin placed his hand near the shimmer. A faint tone resonated through his palm. New passive gained. Echo listener. You can hear fragmented thoughts from emotional fractures in the world. Ballad of the Unbroken evolves. Verse 3 unlocked. Verse 3 unlocked. Let the broken sing again. With trembling voice and wounded pen. We write not for the end we fear, but for the souls who need to hear. The shimmer faded. The night air returned to stillness. Rin turned back to the group. They're not just villains, he said softly. They're victims too, forced to silence themselves or die. Kale shook his head. That's no excuse. It's not, Rin agreed. But it's a reason. Later, while the others slept, Rin sat with his journal by the fire. He wrote lyrics, notes, reflections. Then, a letter, addressed to no one. Dear past me, you were afraid to speak, to sing, to take up space. I don't blame you. That world didn't want her voice. But this one does. This one needs it. And I promise I won't let that voice fade again. I'll sing for both of us. As Kale took first watch, he walked past Rin, then paused. You mean what you said? About trusting her? Rin nodded. Kale leaned against a tree. You're either the bravest guy I've met, or the dumbest. Maybe both, Rin said, smiling softly. Kale gave a short laugh. Fine. I'll watch your back. But the moment I hear her whisper a dark aria, I'm stabbing something. Rin chuckled. Fair. The path to Outpost Grell was littered with shattered crates, torn satchels, and old blood. The forest had grown darker the farther they traveled. No birds, no wind, just stillness. Rin tightened the strap on his satchel and stepped over a cracked wagon wheel. This was a supply route. Lyra nodded. Supposed to connect Noryun to Ehrenfell's capital. Caravans used to pass weekly. Kale crouched beside a broken crate. Used to. These haven't been touched in weeks. No animals scavenged. No bodies. Rin frowned. Why take the people and not the cargo? Because the people resonate, Lyra murmured. Outpost Grell was half-burnt. The wooden palisades were scorched. The main watchtower collapsed inward. The scent of ash and something fouler, like burned metal and damp stone, lingered in the air. Kale drew a dagger. Stay alert. This feels like a trap. As they stepped into the charred remains of the courtyard, Rin's echo listener, passive activated. Faint whispers surrounded them. Too loud. Too bright. It hurts. Silence it. Silence everything. Rin froze. There's something still here. A low growl echoed from the shadows of collapsed storeroom. Then, a burst of corrupted resonance exploded outward. A creature stepped from the dark. It was once a mountain panther, but now it shimmered with fractured magic. Its fur was patchy, pulsing with static lines of broken notes. Its eyes were mirrors of dissonant light. Its growl was a disharmony, a sound that shouldn't exist. An anti-song, Lyra whispered. It's been overwritten, twisted by corrupted frequencies. Someone did this. Kale swore. Then let's undo it. The beast charged. Kale struck first, his blade carving a glowing path. Lyra followed with a harmonic flare, but the beast absorbed it, turning the spell into a pulse of distortion that knocked her backward. Rin braced himself. I can't overpower it. I need to out-resonate it. He inhaled and sang. Ballad of the Unbroken, chorus unlocked. We are the echoes they cannot drown. Voices rise though the world falls down. Through shattered song and broken bone, we find the strength to stand alone. Effect. Dispels sound-based corruption. Restores MP to party. Weakens enemies twisted by corrupted resonance. The beast shrieked, its body flickering like a bad transmission. Kale lunged again, faster this time under the ballad's buff. His strike hit true. Lyra rose and cast a harmonic bind. This time it held, the song stabilizing under Rin's chorus. Run, she called. Finish it. Rin stepped forward, voice rising with the song's final note. Sleep, not as shadow, but as sound. Let your true self be unbound. A final pulse of golden resonance burst from his chest, washing over the beast like a sunrise. It collapsed, breathing shallow. Its corrupted form shimmered and reverted. A broken, malnourished panther cub lay beneath the spell, eyes wide, frightened, alive. Rin knelt beside it, voice soft now. It wasn't a monster, he said. Just hurt. Someone forced the dissonance into it. Lyra looked pale. That kind of manipulation. It takes a resonance cage, forbidden magic. Only noble-backed Aria Labs would have that. Kale's eyes narrowed. And I bet your old friends in the Silence chorus know exactly where those labs are. Among the ruin, Rin found a discarded scroll tube near the beast's original den. Inside was a document, torn, burned, but partially readable. Project Silence Protocol. Phase 2. Vocal extraction. Subjects will be stripped of harmonic cores. Emotional resonance is to be replaced with synchronized obedience. Applied testing begins with prisoners marked echoborn. Rin's blood ran cold. There, try to erase voice from people. Turn them into tools. Lyra clenched her fists. That's why my brother died. He refused to help them build it. Kale cursed. We need to stop this. Burn every lab they have. That night, Rin added a new verse to his journal. His hand shook slightly, but his heart was steady. Not all beasts were claws or fangs. Some smile sweet while forging chains. For every song they try to steal, we'll answer with a truth they feel. This world doesn't need another army. It needs a reason to hope. I won't let the chorus turn songs into weapons. If they demand silence, then I'll raise a choir. The tower loomed over the clearing like a monument to lost time. Black stone, ivy choke walls, dozens of shattered stained glass windows that once sang with sunlight, now dark and broken. It leaned slightly, like it was listening. Rin stepped toward it, his boots crunching against fallen glass. So this is it, he whispered. Lyra stood behind him, her hands clenched at her sides. The old academy, the one my brother trained at. Before everything. Kale snorted. Great. Creepy tower full of musical ghosts. What could go wrong? Inside, the tower was cold. The walls were lined with collapsed lecture halls, rusted instrument racks, cracked harmonic sigil stones. Dust floated in lazy beams of light. Rin placed his hand on a broken pedestal near the entrance. A memory pulsed through him, voices echoing from the past. Control emotion, and you control magic. No, you must feel it. Let move you. Lyra closed her eyes. This is where the kingdom split its soul. Half wanted harmony, the other precision. And which side won? Kale asked. Rin didn't answer. They all knew. They descended into a lower chamber, an old archive room. Here, music sheets littered the floor like fallen leaves. And in the center, an active, humming resonance crystal. That's not old, Rin said sharply. Too late. The chamber door slammed shut. Figures stepped from the shadows, masked, hooded, radiating silence. The silence chorus. One stepped forward and removed their mask. Lyra staggered back. No. Hello, little sister, said the woman, still playing Rebel Bard. Cold, refined, and brilliant. A lead chorus tactician who believes order is salvation. Seraphine's voice was emotionless, but perfectly pitched. You're chasing ghosts, Lyra. Echo weavers. Songs with souls. All fiction. Emotion is flawed. We build a world without it. You killed Orion, Lyra growled. I refined him, Seraphine said. He wanted freedom. I gave him purpose. In silence. The chamber erupted in light and sound. Seraphine's spells weren't like Lyra's. They were sharp, cold, algorithmic. They sliced through air like weapons made of math. Lyra's spells were wild, emotional, chaotic. Kale battled two chorus guards, dancing through their blades. Rin stepped forward and began to sing. We are not gears in silent chains. We are the storm. We are the flame. Our hearts may break, our voices strain, but still we rise and sing through pain. Effect. Immune to emotion-based suppression. Regenerates HP and MP. Temporarily stabilizes harmonic fractures. Boosts all ally magic when sung within ancient resonant zones. The room pulsed with golden energy. Seraphine faltered. Lyra cried out, summoning a wild harmony, an uncontrolled resonance wave fueled by grief and rage. It shattered the crystal in the room, and the walls began to collapse. Time to go, Kale shouted, dragging Rin back. The party fled as the tower groaned, cracked, and finally collapsed inward in a crescendo of stone and shattered silence. They landed in the grass outside, coughing. Rin looked at Lyra. She knelt alone in the field, sobbing, not just from pain but release. She wanted to save someone who couldn't be saved. I know that feeling. I wanted to save myself, back then, but I didn't know how. Maybe now, I can show others the way. Ballad of the Unbroken, complete. Unlock traits. Songsmith of the soul. Compose songs that adapt based on emotional growth. Resonance memory. Spells and songs gain power when cast in meaningful locations. That night, they camped beside the ruins. Kale watched the stars. Lyra slept, exhausted. Rin sat beside the fire. Kale finally spoke. You kept us alive. Again. Rin shook his head. We kept each other alive. Kale looked at him sideways. You're weird. Rin smiled. You're welcome. The road ended in sound. Even before the city's gates were visible, Illydria made itself known. Laughter, bells, distant drums, the layered hum of 1,000 lives woven into a single, living melody. Rin stood atop a hill and stared. Beyond the green valley, the capital unfolded like a blooming flower. Wide, circular tiers rising into the sky. Stone spires arched toward the heavens, many topped with golden wind chimes that rang with every breeze. At its heart was a towering, cathedral-like structure with stained glass wings instead of walls. The high bardic hall, where the royal cantor's circle ruled. Rin let out a slow breath. It's beautiful, he said. Kale squinted. It's loud. Lyra didn't speak. She hadn't said much since the tower fell. At the gate, guards in blue and silver bardic armor checked every wagon, scroll, and instrument. Name? Asked one, a half-elf with a lute across her back. Rin Kazuki, he said, echo-born, traveling under Noryun's seal. The guard blinked. Then her eyes widened. You're the Rin Kazuki? The soul singer? The one who shattered the tower? Rin winced. It wasn't just me. A second guard elbowed the first. Lady Alaris from the guild wants a word. Immediately. The guild hall of Illydria was a palace of sound. Open-roofed amphitheaters, floating note crystals, training rooms with live resonance feedback. Magical instruments hummed faintly when Rin passed by, as if recognizing his voice. Inside the central hall, Lady Alaris, a tall woman with dark skin, golden robes, and piercing green eyes, waited. She gestured to Rin. So, you're the one rewriting the old songs. Rin bowed slightly. Just try not to die, and helping others not die along the way. She smiled. Humility. Rare here. Lady Alaris held up a sealed envelope. You've been formally invited to perform at the Summer Harmony Festival. It's not just a concert. It's political. Nobles, merchants, even royal envoys attend. The kingdom's listening. Kale muttered. Sounds like bait. It is, Alaris said plainly. But it's also protection. Fame in this city means fewer daggers in your back. For a while. Rin looked at the seal. It shimmered with royal silver. I'll sing, he said, but not to impress nobles. I want to reach people like me, like I used to be. Lost. Tired. Quiet. Receipt status panel. Name. Rin Kazuki. Class. Echo Weaver. Level. 7. New title. Soul Singer of Noryun. Reputation. Rising. Capital. Moderate. Ballad of the Unbroken. Complete. Unlock. Living scorebook. Compose new magic songs. Bonus. Festival Harmony skill. Slot unlocked. The party was granted temporary lodging in the Bardic Quarter, a neighborhood of studios, scroll shops, vocal academies, and rooftop cafes. Kale vanished into the crowd. Back in an hour. Or 3. Rin and Lyra wandered the gardens. Fountains sang when wind passed over them. Children tossed enchanted paper cranes. Lyra finally spoke. She's still alive. Seraphine. Lyra nodded. She'll be here. Somewhere in the city. They want to finish what they started. Rin put a hand on her shoulder. Then we make sure the chorus we build is louder than theirs. That evening, while walking alone, Rin found a man on a corner with a broken lute in his lap. He strummed it once. No sound came. Rin paused. Need help. The man didn't look up. No point. I was a bard. Then they took my voice. Rin knelt beside him. The chorus. They came at night. Put something in my throat. I try to sing, and all I get is silence. I'm useless now. Rin said nothing. Instead, he hummed. A low note. Soft. Resonant. And the man's lute responded. One string. Then another. Tears welled in the man's eyes. Rin smiled. You're not broken. You're just out of tune. Musical notes, new song concept drafted. Requiem for the silenced. Not a battle song, but one that heals lost resonance over time. That night, Kale returned with news. They're here. The silence chorus. I tailed 3 of them near the opera district. They're preparing something big. Rin nodded. Then we stay loud. We gather allies. And we sing until we shake their foundations. Kale smirked. That almost sounded heroic. Lyra stepped from the shadows. Let's make it true. The city was singing. From rooftops and gardens, balconies and bridges, Elydria had erupted into melody. The Summer Harmony Festival had begun. Magic lanterns drifted overhead, glowing with the captured hum of last year's performances. Children ran with wind chimes tied to their wrists. Birds flew in spirals, trained to carry song scrolls across the plaza like musical messengers. And in the center of it all was Unity's stage, a massive amphitheater carved from shining white stone, designed to resonate every note into the soul of the city. Tonight, Rin would sing here. Backstage, Rin paced in silence. His fingers twitched. His throat felt dry. Lyra adjusted his cloak and checked the enchanted mic gem embedded in his collar. You face corrupted beasts and magical assassins. You can handle nobles and nobles' boredom. Rin gave a thin smile. I'm not afraid of the crowd. I'm afraid of what this means. If I sing here, I stop being invisible. Kale leaned against a pillar. You stopped being invisible when you made a goblin explode with a power cord. Fair. Status snapshot. Name, Rin Kazuki. Title, Soul Singer of Noryan. Class, Echo Weaver. Level 8. Signature song, Ballad of the Unbroken, closed. In progress song, Requiem for the Silenced, 70% complete. Festival slot activated. Audience bonding, high. A royal bard stepped onto the stage and called out, People of Elydria, today we welcome the voice that echoed from ruins and rang across towers. He who sings not for fame, but for healing. He turned. Rin Kazuki, Echo Weaver. Thunderous applause followed. And then, silence. Rin stepped onto the stage. Thousands of eyes stared. He took a breath and sang. For voices lost in shadows keep. For dreams that faded into sleep. For names unsaid and hands unheld. This song is where your stories dwell. As he sang, glowing threads of light unfurled from his body, resonant lines of memory and emotion. They drifted into the crowd, wrapping around listeners like silk. Some gasped. Others cried. A few dropped to their knees. Song effect. Restores minor lost resonance to suppress souls. Temporarily lifts emotional blocks. Weakens chorus enchantments nearby. And that's when it happened. The stage cracked. From the center emerged a masked figure, tall and regal, dressed in white with robes that shimmered like static. Seraphine Ellenhart. Lyra froze in the wings. Seraphine raised one hand, and the sound vanished. A wave of suppression magic rolled over the amphitheater, silencing every instrument, every singer, every voice. You will not steal this world with song, she said. Her voice was flawless and lifeless. Lyra stepped onto the stage. Without hesitation, without fear. I challenge you, she said, her voice steady. By blood and bond, by right of Arya. The crowd gasped. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. So dramatic. Very well. They circled. 2 mages. 2 sisters. 2 sides of the same melody. Lyra struck first, an aria of flame. Seraphine countered with a discord barrier, a harmonic inversion that turned Lyra's spell into a cold gust of wind. Rin watched, stunned by the precision, the raw emotion buried under every note. But Seraphine was too strong. She advanced. Lyra staggered. Rin stepped forward. No, Seraphine snapped. This is Arya law. Dual interference is death. I'm not interfering, Rin said. I'm harmonizing. He began to sing again. Requiem for the Silenced. Verse 2. You took their songs, but not their name. You try to chain what can't be tamed. I sing not just to bring them peace, but so their voices never cease. Resonant spike detected. Suppression magic disrupted. Crowd enchanted. Emotional immunity. 100%. 10 seconds. Lyra's body surged with new energy. She sang again, louder, stronger. This time her spell struck true, breaking Seraphine's static shield and forcing her backward. The crowd erupted, not in panic, but in song. They began to hum, softly at first, then louder. One by one, they harmonized. Rin realized it wasn't his spell, it was connection. The city was singing with him. Seraphine hissed. retreating as chorus agents rushed to her side. "You've made an enemy of the inevitable," she warned. "The world doesn't need music. It needs order." Rin didn't reply. He just sang louder. "Requiem for the Silenced. 100% complete. New spell. Echo restoration. Restore a lost voice, memory, or song through deep harmonic connection. Only usable once per day. New trait. Voice of the many. When singing before a group that trusts you. Gain 25% power boost. Audience bond. High inspired." The guild hall was in chaos. Nobles demanded answers. Soldiers swept the stage. The queen's voice envoys arrived, but no arrests were made. Too public. Too delicate. Rin sat backstage with Lyra, Kale, and Lady Alaris. Alaris looked between them. "You're not just a bard anymore, Rin. You're a symbol, a problem, and a possibility." Rin looked down at his hands. "I don't want to be a symbol." Alaris leaned forward. "Then be a song people remember." After Rin's soul-stirring performance at the Harmony Festival and the public battle with Lyra's sister Seraphine, a high-ranking member of the Silence Chorus, the people of Elydria are stirred. Some fear him, some admire him, and some begin to follow his music. The city is changing. Rin awoke to the gentle hush of the bardic quarter. Outside his window, a flock of enchanted sparrows tweeted notes from his concert, mimicking his melody as they darted through the morning sky. His room smelled of parchment and lavender oil. A half-filled journal sat at his bedside. The final lines of Requiem for the Silenced still burned in his mind. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't running, and it scared him. He sat up slowly, brushing sleep from his eyes. A soft knock tapped at his door. "Come in." Lyra stepped inside, dressed simply, without her usual battle coat. She looked calm, but her eyes still held a flicker of shadows. "The square is full again," she said. "More people humming your songs." Rin gave a soft smile. "I didn't expect this." No one did, especially not the chorus. They walked to the center of the bardic quarter. What they saw froze Rin in place. A crowd, dozens, maybe hundreds, stood beneath the elevated plaza steps. Not shouting, not cheering, humming. His song, "Let the Broken Sing Again." Young and old, nobles and merchants, cloaked strangers and children in festival garb. Rin looked at Lyra. "Who are they?" She met his eyes. "They're your echo." A girl stepped forward, no older than 11, and handed him a bundle of paper. He opened it. Dozens of hand-copied song scrolls. His lyrics. Some were neat, others messy. All shared one thing. Hope. "We sing it every morning," the girl said. "Mama says it helps her sleep, even after Papa went quiet." Rin knelt to her level. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Ember." He gently placed his hand over her scroll and sang a single note. It glowed with gold light. "Now your voice is part of the song, too." System alert. Audience bonding. Very high. New trait unlocked. Choir heart. When 3 or more people sing your song nearby, amplify magical effects by 20%. Bonus. Crowd immunity to suppression. Reputation. Elevated. Elydria. Admired. Later that day, a masked figure approached Rin's group while they rested at a cafe above the market square. Kale immediately reached for his knife. "Wait," Lyra said. "They're humming." In harmony. The figure removed her mask. A middle-aged woman, face lined with age and defiance, bowed her head. "We're the chorus unbound," she said. "We've been watching, listening. Your voice reached places we thought were dead." Rin stared. "You're rebels." She nodded. "We were aria instructors, caretakers, street bards, until the chorus branded us dangerous. We don't fight with weapons. We fight with memory." She passed him a small stone. It glowed faintly with his song's melody. "When your voice is heard again," she said, "so will ours." Item obtained. Resonance Keystone. Connects with all bonded singers of the Ballad of the Unbroken in Elydria. Grants passive map awareness of areas under chorus surveillance. That night, Kale and Run sat on the roof of their inn, watching the stars above the capital. "Ever wonder what they're planning?" Kale asked quietly. "The chorus." "No. The people." Rin raised an eyebrow. Kale smirked. "People like to worship heroes until they fail. And they all fail. You think I'll fail?" Kale was quiet for a long time. Then, he said, "I used to be like them. Believed in people. Had a brother. Taught me how to fight. Said one day, We'd open a songhouse for orphans. He believed songs saved lives. What happened? The chorus got him, branded him a voice threat, said his harmonics were too dangerous, said he could incite emotion in crowds. Rin swallowed. Did you ever see him again? Kale shook his head. They don't just silence. They erase. Every time someone sings my song, I wonder if I deserve it. I'm not strong like a knight or wise like a sage. I'm just trying. But maybe that's enough. If I fall, maybe someone else will pick up the melody. Maybe that's how harmony survives. At dawn, a thunderous boom echoed through the city. The central resonance bell of Elydria cracked. Run and the others rushed to the plaza to find the city in chaos. The sound of the bell had shattered glass, collapsed the tower arch, and stunned dozens. The queen's guard stood in panic. Then a message rang out, clear, magical, and terrifying. Let silence reclaim the city. The next bell that breaks will be your voice. Signed, the Silence Chorus. Inside the council chamber, the queen's representatives met with nobles, generals, and guild leaders. Rin was summoned. Many nobles scoffed at his presence. But when Lady Alara spoke, they listened. He has reach, she said. You have force. But the people follow his voice, not yours. Rin stood before the council. I don't want power, he said. But I won't let you keep pretending this is someone else's problem. The chorus isn't at the gates. They're already inside. Option 1. Work with the Queen's Guild to mobilize defenses and push propaganda. Option 2. Support the underground choir and spread songs through the streets. Choice made. Path of the people. Echo through the streets. New subclass trait. Street singer. Your influence spreads faster through informal channels. Bonus. +10 to emotional bond gain per NPC interaction. That night, from every corner of the city, Rin's song echoed. From taverns, balconies, rooftops, courtyards. Quietly, proudly, defiantly. He didn't lead it. He simply stood in the square and listened. Children hummed it in rhythm. Mothers whispered it over their sick. An old man played it with 3 notes on a broken harp. And the air itself seemed to respond. For one night, the city remembered it could feel. You can silence a person. You can silence a street. But you can't silence a song once someone else has learned the melody. This city isn't mine, but its music is. And I'll protect it, even if I break trying. The message came just past midnight. A pigeon bearing a sealed scroll landed softly on Ren's windowsill. The seal was marked with a symbol, a broken staff, rejoined by thread. The sign of the chorus, unbound. Ren unrolled the parchment with trembling fingers. The lab exists. Underground. Below the opera district. Chambered beneath the old echo chambers. Left over from the pre-royal era. They are harvesting resonance. Beneath the script, in smaller writing. They have prisoners. Voices. Maybe one you know. He didn't wait. He roused Kale and Lyra from their rooms. Within 10 minutes, the 3 of them were cloaked, armed, and slipping into the shadows of Elydria's midnight streets. They reached the opera district just before the 3rd moon passed its zenith. Tall buildings loomed above, a mix of artistic brilliance and eerie silence. This part of the city had been closed since the festival, under restoration, according to guards. But the whispers said otherwise. Lyra knelt at the base of a rusted grate tucked behind a forgotten statue of the goddess of echoes. I feel it, she said. Mana distortion. A lot of it. Kale slid his dagger along the edges of the grate until it clicked loose. Rin peered into the tunnel below. It smelled like dust, copper, and something fainter, like forgotten music. I hate tunnels, Kale muttered, dropping down after them. They moved through winding stone tunnels until they reached a door of silence. A smooth iron wall with no handle, no seams, and no sound. Even footsteps vanished near it. Rin placed a hand on it. A chill raced up his arm. Emotionless. Empty. This wasn't a wall. It was a barrier against memory. Lyra hummed softly, pressing a glowing aria glyph to the wall. Her tune shifted, sharpened, until a hairline crack appeared. Now run, she said. He sang just 3 notes, soft, full of regret and remembrance. The door shuttered, then opened with a gasp of stolen air. Effect. Opens doors sealed with resonance-based suppression. Strength increases when used in duet with known aria mages. Duration. 10 seconds. Inside was silence made real. Dark, stone corridors lined with glowing veins of red crystal. Doors sealed by runes. Magical lights that flickered not with flame, but with stored vocal energy. Resonance harnessed and compressed into power. Lyra gasped. These are stolen voices. Kale nodded grimly. Welcome to the graveyard. Down the left corridor, they found the first cell. Inside, a boy, no older than 15. Pale, shivering, staring into nothing. Rin tapped the door. The boy didn't move. Lyra placed her hand on the wall and sang, just a fragment of the Ballad of the Unbroken. The boy blinked, then blinked again. His lips trembled. Then, with effort, he whispered, still singing. Rin's throat clenched. They opened more doors. 10 prisoners. Then 20. Some were street bards. Others were former Arya scholars. Some, children. All silent. All broken. Until one door opened. And Kale froze. Inside the last cell was a man. Older. Lean. With the same sharp features as Kale. Corinne. Kale whispered. The man looked up. His eyes were dull. Empty. But when Kale stepped forward, something flickered. Rin watched as Kale dropped to his knees. This is my brother, Kale said. He's alive, Lyra whispered, but they silenced him. Rin stepped closer. Let me try. He placed a hand on Corinne's forehead and sang. Musical notes. In memory we find the thread. Through echoes once thought lost or dead. If you still feel, then let it show, and let your voice begin to grow. Requiem for the silenced. Activated. Target, Corinne Draven. Result, partial restoration of vocal memory. Emotional state stabilized. Voice partially returned. Corinne blinked, then spoke, hoarse and fragile. Kale. Kale's mask cracked. He reached forward, shaking. Corinne took his hand. I never stopped singing, he whispered. The moment the door fully opened, red runes across the walls flared. A shrill tone shattered the silence. Containment breach. Echo class resonance anomaly detected. From deeper within the lab, footsteps thundered. Kale stood, rage burning in his eyes. We finish this, or no one ever will. They reached the central chamber, a massive, circular room filled with suspended crystal orbs, each holding a pulsing echo. At the center, a tall woman in white robes waited, flanked by 2 chorus guards. You should not be here, she said. Her voice was like oil poured over fire. Lyra stepped forward. You're one of the designers. The woman bowed slightly. I am Estra, vocal architect of the silenced chorus. You are notes that must be erased. Boss fight. Estra, vocal architect. Abilities. Resonance bind. Paralyzes a target by locking their voice to a frequency loop. Aria reversal. Reflects low-level harmonics back at the caster. Still choir. Silences an entire area, unless countered by synchronized spell. Kale rushed in, daggers flashing. Lyra cast Aria bind to slow the guards. Rin opened with a solo verse of Ballad of the Unbroken, shielding his allies. But Estra struck fast, locking Lyra in a resonance loop. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Rin screamed, no. He ran to her side and reached for her hand. Sing with me. Run. Break the cage. Release the strain. Lyra, we are not made to be restrained. Together, in voices joined, our chains unwind, and harmony shall not be blind. Duet spell unlocked. Unshackled refrain. Effect. Cancels all silence-based magic within range. Grants temporary immunity to suppression for entire party. Can only be used in emotional sync. Estra's spell shattered. Her guards faltered. Rin sang again, this time with the voices of the prisoners behind him. The prisoners, weak but willing, hummed the ballad's melody. It spread through the chamber. Corinne joined, voice rough but proud. And Estra finally panicked. No, this shouldn't be possible. You're nothing but noise. Rin stepped forward. No, he said. We're resonance. He struck the final chord. Light exploded through the room. Boss defeated. Estra, vocal architect. Status, captured. Vocal resonance disabled. Achievement unlocked. Liberator of the voiceless. Title bonus. +10 charisma. New resistance to corruption magic. They guided the freed prisoners to safety. The guild was waiting. So was Lady Alaris. Kale walked beside Corinne in silence, refusing to leave his side. Rin sat on a bench near the exit, Lyra beside him. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We all did. Status update. Rin Kazuki. Class. Echo Weaver. Level 9. Traits gained. Choir Heart. Voice of the Many. Street Singer. Echo Unlock. Unshackled Refrain. Liberator of the Voiceless. Reputation. Revered. For 3 days, Elydria sang. Bards in alleyways strummed Rin's songs on old strings. Tavern halls echoed with harmonies once forbidden. Even the stone walkways seemed to hum with unseen melodies. Rin sat on the balcony of the Bardic Guild, watching morning fog curl across the rooftops. His hands rested on the rail, but his eyes were far away. Corinne had spoken 3 full sentences the night before. Kale hadn't left his side. Lyra had returned to the archives, digging through her brother's notes for signs of what the chorus might do next. Everything felt still, but Rin knew better. That afternoon, Rin was summoned to the High Bardic Hall. Not by Lady Alaris this time, but by a royal envoy. The hall was quiet. A single figure stood by the stained-glass window, hands folded. Queen Seraph of Aurelian, cloaked in moon-colored silk, silver streaks in her braided hair. Her voice was calm, measured. You've brought harmony to the city. But harmony, unchecked, becomes chaos. Rin bowed stiffly. I only sang. The people chose to listen. And if they choose to follow a song into rebellion? He looked up. Then maybe what they're rebelling against is worth listening to. A pause. Then, surprisingly, a smile. Good answer. She offered him a scroll, gold-trimmed, sealed with the royal crest. This is an invitation, not a command. Join the court as a royal voice. Sing for peace, for balance, and to stay alive. System alert. Major decision point. Path fork. Courtly harmony. Accept the Queen's offer. Gain influence, security, and limited freedom. Wandering melody. Decline and remain with the people. Keep your voice, but gain powerful enemies. Choice. Wandering melody. I can't sing for someone who expects silence when it's inconvenient. New title gained. Rebel Voice of Elydria. Passive. Plus 15% crowd persuasion. Minus 10% noble favor. The Queen exhaled. Then be ready. The chorus will not strike again in the shadows. Next time, they will break something that cannot be repaired. That night, as the party gathered on the rooftop for quiet tea, the air changed. A single, unnatural note split the sky. No scream, no impact, just silence spreading outward in a perfect circle. The group stood alarmed. From every tower, spire, and bell across Elydria, the sound of music vanished. A glowing rune appeared in the air above the city. Then a voice. Seraphine Ellenhart, you were warned. You chose dissonance. Now you will learn what silence means. From the horizon, a beam of gray light pierced the sky, and one by one, resonance wells, the magical anchors of the city, began to fail. Panic spread instantly. Spells fizzled. Song scrolls disintegrated. Loot shattered. Shops collapsed under mana feedback. Bridges of harmonic stone crumbled. A tower of crystal glass imploded mid-harmony rehearsal. People screamed, not in pain, but in isolation. They couldn't feel their magic. They couldn't feel anything. Ren ran through the streets, voice raw, trying to hold a melody together. He tried everything. Ballad of the Unbroken. Requiem for the Silenced. Nothing held. The party made it to one of the few still-lit resonance altars near the Temple of Era. Lyra collapsed to her knees. She's targeting the emotional flow lines. She's not silencing spells. She's silencing people. Kale growled. How do we fight something we can't hear coming? Ren stared at the pulsing altar and made a decision. We go to the source. Deep beneath the city, where the oldest harmonic rootstone lay, was a tower never marked on maps. The true birthplace of Elydria's song. The party descended through rubble, darkness, and fractured mana until they reached the entrance. The tower pulsed not with power, but with void. Inside, Seraphine, waiting, alone. Seraphine turned slowly. You were supposed to disappear after Norian. Rin stepped forward. You tried to erase a melody, but now it's a movement. Then let me offer you one last truth, she said. I can end your pain, end your grief. Just stop feeling, and you'll never suffer again. He took a breath and sang. Musical notes, even if my voice breaks. Even if I fall, better a song with sorrow than silence at all. Lyra joined him, her voice trembling, but rising. Kale hummed a low harmony, eyes locked on Seraphine. The stones shook. The void pushed back, but the melody held. New song. The choir will rise. Duet song. Lyra and Ren. Effect. Restores emotional resonance to all allies within range. Reverses localized suppression fields. Creates an echo zone immune to void magic for 5 minutes. Seraphine's power cracked. Her magic shattered like stained glass under truth. She collapsed. Not defeated, but exposed. "Why do you fight so hard?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" Ren's voice broke. "Because someone once told me my voice didn't matter. And now I know they were wrong." The next morning, music returned to Elydria. Not all at once. Not as a chorus. But in scattered notes. A flute in the merchant quarter. A child's hum in a window. A bell that hadn't rung in years. And in the Bardic Guild, Ren wrote one final verse. A choir is not one alone. It is hands and hearts and home. And even if we break apart, we find each other, note by heart. Elydria was still healing. The bells had begun to ring again, though uncertainly. Musicians returned to their stages. The Bardic Guild reopened its grand hall, and Ren's songs were being archived. Not as spells, but historical events. And yet, Ren stood at the edge of the East Gate, gazing at the wildlands. A sea of broken forest, overgrown ruins, and whispering wind. Kale adjusted his cloak. "You sure about this?" The Queen's envoy said she'd back off for now. Ren nodded. "For now. But she's not the only one watching. If the chorus gets to the Soul Forge first, we won't get a second chance." Lyra stepped beside them, her travel staff humming faintly. "Besides, some songs need to be sung where no one listens, especially there." Behind them, footsteps approached. Corinne, still pale, still quiet, but no longer broken. "I'm coming too," he said. Kale opened his mouth, then shut it. Finally, he just nodded. "Don't slow us down." Corinne smiled faintly. "No promises." Party update. Run, Echo Weaver, level 10. Lyra, Arya Mage, level 9. Kale, Shadow Stepper, level 9. Corinne, Resonance Echo, level unknown. New region entered. The wildlands of Dareth Ka. All magic affected by wild harmony. Passive mana distortion. Echo memory disruption possible. The forest wasn't like the ones near Norian. This one listened. Leaves shifted even without wind. Trees leaned as if watching. And Ren could hear faint melodies. Not songs, but shadows of them. Echoes from forgotten singers. "This place," Lyra whispered. "It remembers." Ren nodded, but only in pieces. They set up camp near a broken stone arch. That night, Ren tried practice, but every time he played a melody, the forest echoed it back wrong. Twisted. Empty. The next morning, something was wrong. Kale stared at his dagger like he didn't recognize it. Ren blinked twice. He just tried to start Ballad of the Unbroken, but the words wouldn't come. I know this," he murmured. "I wrote this." Lyra gasped, touching her forehead. They weren't kidding about memory disruption. The Forge's influence must be spreading already. Corinne frowned. "If this keeps up, you might forget how to fight. Or sing." Kale growled. "Or worse, who we are." Status alert. Memory flux zone detected. Spells require double focus to cast. Party members may forget minor skills temporarily. Bond-based magic gains strength. Emotional connections anchor identity. Midway through a decayed courtyard, they were ambushed. The creature looked like a panther, but its body shifted constantly, as if it were made of overlapping memories. Half-grown, half-rotted. Its roar came as a chorus of voices screaming in harmony. Kale struck first. His blade passed right through. Lyra attempted a flame aria, but the sound scattered like wind. Ren knew what to do. "Sing with me," he called. Together, he and Lyra sang a memory anchor verse. "If I forget, remind me true, that once I fought and bled with you. Our names may fade, our spells decay, but not the song we made that day." Spell unlocked. Shared memory verse. Allies within range become immune to memory distortion for 2 minutes. Bonus. Revealed true form of echo-born beasts. The creature snarled and solidified. Corinne moved fast, blade in hand. He struck it in the center of its pulsing chest. The beast shattered into glowing notes. After the battle, Corinne sat alone. Kale approached quietly. You knew how to fight. Corinne nodded. They tried to erase my voice, but they trained me to be something else before that. Something worse. Rin joined them. What do you mean? Corinne's voice was hollow. They called it voice burning. They trained chorus prisoners to hold stolen resonance and burn it into others. I was supposed to become a carrier, a bomb. Kale's hands curled into fists. Rin placed a hand on Corinne's shoulder. You're not that anymore. Corinne looked up. Then help me remember who I am. New trait unlocked. Bonded echo Corinne. Rin and Corinne share passive emotional awareness. Corinne can recover forgotten memories faster when near Rin. Finally, they found it. A massive obsidian slab built into a cliff face. No seams. No locks. Just one phrase carved in broken script. He who sings with no self shall enter and be forgotten. Lyra's voice trembled. The soul forge. Kale cursed. So how do we get in without becoming? Rin stepped forward and sang. But not a spell. Not a performance. A memory. Musical notes. I used to wake up at 5:45. Cold coffee. Late trains. Noise I couldn't sing over. Now, I have this. The slab pulsed and opened. Unlock triggered. Soul signature access. Rin Kazuki confirmed. Entry granted. Memory anchor required for safe passage. The party entered the dark. Behind them, the door sealed, and all the forest fell silent. The moment the obsidian door sealed behind them, everything changed. There was no echo, no footsteps, no light, no sound at all. Rin held up his hand and whispered, light. Nothing happened. The word didn't exist here. Or maybe it didn't matter. Lyra tried to cast a guiding aria, but her melody fractured before it left her lips. Kale muttered a curse, and even though it was stolen by the walls, only Corinne's breath remained, shallow, deliberate. The soul forge doesn't mute you, he whispered. It asks you to choose which part of yourself to keep. A narrow hallway emerged from the darkness, lined with floating slabs of obsidian, each glowing with soft red runes. On each slab, a name, then a line of text, then nothing. Rin Kazuki, he who thought his voice didn't matter. Lyra Ellenhart, she who ran from her song. Kale Draven, he who trusted and burned. Corinne, he who was rewritten. The walls responded. One of you must give up your name to pass. Silence. Then Lyra stepped forward. Take mine. Rin turned, alarmed. Lyra, I've hidden behind it long enough. If I lose it, maybe I'll remember who I really am. The rune absorbed her name. The hallway opened. Status effect. Name suppression, Lyra. Until the soul forge is escaped, Lyra cannot be addressed by name or cast named aria spells. Her emotional magic is heightened, but unstable. They entered the next chamber and froze. Figures stood motionless, dozens of them, made of dust and resonance threads, their faces half-formed, each holding instruments long corroded. These were bards, Rin whispered, or their echoes. The room pulsed with a hollow hum. One of the dust echoes turned to him and said in a layered, broken voice, Sing, or be forgotten. The room demanded one thing, proof. Not power, not force, remembrance. Rin stepped forward and sang the first song he ever learned as a child. A lullaby from his mother's kitchen. Light the sky with paper dreams, folded notes and silver beams. If I'm lost and you can't see, sing this song to bring me free. The echoes paused, then bowed. The chamber opened. Skill gained. Echo reconnection. Once per day, restore one forgotten spell, memory, or passive in yourself or an ally. Bonus effect. Recover 20 MP and reduce soul forge mental pressure. Halfway through the next chamber, a winding hallway made of stone mirrors, Kale stopped. He looked into one reflection and said nothing. Then another. Then another. I don't remember which one is real. Rin turned. Kale. Kale took a step backward. I don't remember. Why I fight. The hallway whispered. You were betrayed. But not for the reason you think. Kale's hands trembled. Corinne grabbed his shoulder. You're not who they told you to be. You're better. Kale didn't move. Rin sang, desperate low off key. A fragment of the ballad of the unbroken. If I lose you, let me find. A name, a touch, a tie that binds. Kale blinked. Then laughed. Sharp and sudden. Okay. That was dramatic enough for me to snap out of it. Bond strengthened. Rin plus Kale. Kale now gains +5 resistance to mental corruption while within 10 meters of Rin. May share flashbacks when under emotional stress. At last, they reach the inner sanctum, a wide, circular room with no floor. Only a suspended platform surrounded by singing stones, each emitting a different broken melody. And in the center, a crystalline tree with thousands of memory threads woven into its roots. The Soul Forge. Floating above it, a chorus of 3. Figures in cloaks. No faces, only voices. You come to reclaim what was lost, they said in unison. Then give us what you cherish most. The Soul Forge demanded sacrifice. One person must give up their most cherished memory in order to extract the key, the melody seed, needed to stop the chorus from activating the full Oblivion song. Each party member began to step forward. Rin stopped them. I'll do it. Lyra turned, face pale. Rin, no. If you give that up, I've taken too much already. Let me give something back. He stepped to the tree and placed his hand on the core. I give you the sound of the moment I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The tree pulsed. Rin's eyes dimmed, just for a moment. He staggered. Lyra caught him. Kale stared. What did you lose? Rin blinked. I don't remember what the inn in Norien looked like. Lyra's grip tightened. You gave up our first day together. He smiled faintly. But I still remember the song. Item acquired, melody seed. Can awaken sleeping harmonics. Can unlock sealed emotions and ancient magic. One-time use. May draw the attention of hidden entities. Status. Emotional anchor missing. -5 to memory checks. +15 to empathy-based magic. They left the forge in silence. Behind them, the tree hummed with new color, a hint of gold in the silver. At the exit, a final message awaited them, carved in the stone. When a final song is sung, and even echoes fade, the soul that remembers will choose. Rin looked up and saw something in the sky, a faint, spiraling note of black. The Oblivion song had already begun. The land beyond the Soul Forge was unlike anything they'd seen. Ash covered the ground like fallen snow. Trees stood petrified, frozen mid-motion, as though turned to stone while trying to flee. Buildings, statues, and towers, all in ruin, but none damaged. Just forgotten. The party approached a grand archway, half buried in soot, carved in fading script. Varela's, city of the first voice. Kale exhaled slowly. I've read about this place, but I thought it was a myth. Lyra touched the wall. They say the first echo weaver sang here, and died trying to stop the first Oblivion pulse. Rin looked ahead. Then we'll find what they left behind. Warning. Oblivion pulse residue detected. Memory and identity distortion at 15%. Emotional magic weakened. All party skills may degrade. As they walked the empty avenues, faint harmonics echoed from crumbling amphitheaters. Notes without meaning, words without context. At a collapsed fountain, they found a statue, headless, cradling a broken instrument. A plaque read, Aureline, last of the Echo Guard. Rin paused. I know that name. It was in one of Ven's scrolls. Corin nodded. She was the first to weaponize grief into a melody. Kale muttered, charming. Then the air shifted, and from the ruins stepped a woman wrapped in layers of dusty cloth and melody threads. Humming softly, voice fractured. She wasn't chorus. She wasn't whole. But she was alive. Her name was Ira. She'd been a child during the fall of Varela's. Her family had protected the temple, but when the Oblivion song struck, they vanished. Not dead, just forgotten. She alone remembered their names. And because she remembered, the magic hadn't taken her. Ira explained, the Oblivion song isn't destruction. It's deletion. It finds emotional resonance and unwrites it. If you forget enough of yourself, you vanish. Lyra paled. Rin whispered, that's what they want. Ira nodded. It's not silence they crave. It's a clean slate. Lore unlocked. Oblivion song, rewrite magic. Alters the harmonic structure of reality. Can erase history, spells, names, and people. Resistance depends on emotional anchoring. Quest updated. Protect the melody seed. The melody seed may be the only way to resist total rewrite by the Oblivion song. It must be awakened in a song of shared grief. Ira led them to the first hall, a ruined performance chamber deep beneath the city. The walls were etched with fading spell music, and the air was heavy with ghost light. To proceed, they had to confront what had been rewritten. Each of them heard voices not their own. Run, his mother's lullaby, but sung in a stranger's voice. Lyra, her brother's laugh, but twisted, empty. Kale, Corinne's final scream, before silence. Corinne, his own voice, crying out to be remembered. Rin fell to one knee. I don't know who I am without these. Lyra gripped his hand. Then remember this. Lyra sang first. A single note of sorrow. Rin joined her. I don't need every memory, just the ones that remind me why I keep going. Song triggered. Remembered's canticle. Share between Lyra and Run. Contemporarily, overwrite. Oblivion pulses within range. Limited use. Emotional cost. High. The ghost faded. The path cleared. But Corinne didn't move. He looked down at his hands. If they erase me again, I don't think I'll come back. Kale placed a hand on his shoulder. Then I'll keep remembering you. Rin spoke softly. We all will. They reached the heart of the city, the chamber of the first song. In the center, a pulsing crystal, cracked but still singing. It held the final verse of Aurelian's lost melody, the one she died trying to sing. Ira stepped back. It's not complete. You have to finish it. But if you do, something will answer. Rin approached the crystal. He felt warmth, and grief, and recognition. He sang. Not a perfect note, a broken one, but true. Even if you forget my name, let the song remain. Even if I fade from mind, let the music find. The crystal shattered, and from the ruins rose something new. A creature unlike any other, formed of stardust, sound, and sorrow, emerged from the broken song. The first echo. It did not attack. It did not speak. It sang. Each note pressed against their memories, testing, unraveling, offering to rewrite them with peace. Rin stood tall. I don't want peace that costs who I am. He raised the melody seed and sang again. This is me. Cracked, messy, loud, and I won't trade it for silence. The first echo bowed and vanished. In its place, a glowing new note. Item acquired. Can be embedded into a future song to grant permanent immunity to oblivion rewrite magic. Usable once. Rin's level. 11. New trait. Songkeeper's burden. You carry the weight of lost melodies. Gain plus 20% spell power when defending memory. As they left the city, Ira remained behind. I'll guard the names, she said. But when the final song comes, call me. Rin nodded. They crossed the ash road in silence, each carrying something heavier than before. Asterisk. A song can be forgotten. A name can fade. But what it meant, that survives. The chorus thinks silence is power. But they're wrong. Power is what we remember together. And I remember us. They didn't speak much on the return journey. Not out of fear, but grief. Even with the note of identity tucked safely in Ren's satchel, he could feel something, humming, a wrongness at the edge of every note. At night, the trees no longer echoed their songs. They predicted them. Lyra's voice cracked once mid-spell. Corinne forgot Kale's name for an hour. And Run. He dreamed of singing a song he didn't know, on a stage he'd never seen, before a crowd that wore no faces. System notification. Temporal resonance disruption detected. A song written by you exists in the world, but you have not composed it. Do you wish to retrieve its fragments? Yes. Back in the Bardic Guild, Lady Alaris greeted them with tension in her voice. You've been gone 2 weeks, she said. Rin blinked. It felt like 3 days. Lyra frowned. Temporal bleed. The Oblivion song's echo is slipping into normal space. Alaris nodded grimly. That's not all. A girl in the slums was heard humming a tune, one that compels emotion, mimics the ballad of the unbroken, and ends in silence. She handed Rin a parchment. Half-written lyrics. A melody line. At the bottom. Kazuki, Rin. Rin's fingers trembled. I didn't write this. But someone thinks you did, Kale said. Or someone wants the world to believe it, Corinne added. New objective. Track the song that shouldn't be. They followed leads through the city, listening for the melody. In an orphanage, 3 children sang it unconsciously in their sleep. In a forgotten chapel, a stained glass panel shifted when Rin sang a counternote. In a marketplace, a blind old man whispered, that tune, It's from the end. That night, Rin meditated near the temple of Era. The song came to him again, but this time it was complete. He heard all. Sing the silence into flame. Call the echo without name. When all is lost and breath won't be. Remember the song that shouldn't be. The melody was haunting, final, beautiful, and then it stopped. And a voice, his own, whispered, "This is the last song I'll ever sing." He woke up screaming. Alaris called the party to the deepest level of the Bardic Guild, the Memory Vault, where unfinished songs of past legends are stored. There, in a case marked with sealing runes, was a scroll Run had never seen, but one written in his hand. Kale checked the magic. "It's real. This is from the future," Lyra whispered. "We're dealing with harmonic recursion." The song's echo traveled backward. Corinne added, "But if it reaches full form, the future it came from might become real." New spell option. The song that shouldn't be. Type. Unknown. Status. Incomplete. 4 of 7 verses discovered. Warning. Casting this spell may stabilize or corrupt time flow. Can only be fully written by the person it originated from. Rin exhaled. "Then we finish it before someone else does." As they left the vault, a tremor shook the guild. Not from within, but from the sky. Dark shapes drifted overhead. Figures singing the inverted version of the mystery song. The Silence chorus had learned the tune. Their goal. Finish it first, and twist its meaning. "The last melody shall be the first weapon," said a chorus priest through static. "And your legacy, Rin Kazuki, will be our symphony." Rin sang the unfinished version. The chorus sang theirs. The melodies clashed in the sky, bursting into motes of memory and light, falling like fireflies across the city. Every listener heard a different line. Every heart trembled. In the burst of conflict, Rin was thrown into a dreamlike vision. A world without color. Lyra, silent and unrecognizing. Kale, a guard of the chorus. Corinne erased. Himself, smiling but voiceless. He screamed, but no one turned. Only one voice answered. "Iris, finish the song your way, not theirs." Back in his body, Rin wrote. Hands trembling, voice shaking. He added a new line to the song. "If this is my last refrain, let not be sung in vain." The moment the ink dried, the chorus's spell shattered. They screamed, discordant, and retreated. Rin collapsed. The city cheered, but only quietly. Spell progress. The song that shouldn't be. 5 of 7 verses discovered. New trait. Fate echo. You can hear fragments of your future when near harmonic distortions. Warning. Overuse may cause disassociation. As they gathered in a quiet chamber that night, Rin looked at the scroll. Kale asked, "You gonna finish it?" Rin didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Only if it means no one else has to." Songs travel forward. Some echo back. But the ones that stay are the ones we write together. This song isn't mine alone anymore. And if it ends in silence, then let it be a silence earned, not imposed. Rin stared at the incomplete scroll. 5 verses written. 2 left. Each word felt like fire. Each note tried to sing itself. Corinne knelt nearby, breathing heavily. "I keep forgetting things again." Kale leaned against the wall. "We don't have time." The chorus is moving. Lyra's eyes shimmered. They've started the final phase. The choir master has returned. Rin gripped the scroll. "I have to finish it. Tonight." They journeyed to a small hill just outside the city, a place where the stars could hear. Rin planted the melody seed into the earth. As it sank into the soil, a wave of golden light burst out, and a spectral tree of stardust bloomed in seconds. Each leaf sang a note from his past. His first day in Noryan. Lyra laughing beside a waterfall. Kale watching the stars in silence. Corinne's hoarse whisper, "You brought me back." Then silence. The seed had awakened. Melody seed activated. You may now complete the song that shouldn't be. Upon completion, a permanent magical effect will change the fate of the party and the world. The sky turned dark. The choir master descended, draped in robes that shimmered with unmusic, face hidden behind a mirrored mask. Behind him, the silenced chorus, their songs now hollow weapons. "You have written the future," the choir master said, "but it is ours to conduct." Rin stepped forward. "I'm not singing alone." He held the scroll in one hand, his allies' hands in the other. "We are not the silence you command. We're the choir you can't contain. Song that shouldn't be. Verse 6 unlocked. If all that's left is fading light, and shadows rise to steal the fight, then let this voice defy the night. A single song, a single right. Kale darted into shadow, severing notes before they reached run. Lyra sang counterchords, unraveling chorus spells midair. Corinne stood at Ren's back, his resonance unstable but burning bright. The choir master launched a null aria, shattering part of the melody tree. Ren fell to one knee. I need the final verse. Suddenly, the choir master's spell wrapped around Corinne's chest, ripping away his reformed resonance. Corinne gasped. He's trying to erase me again. Ren shouted. No. Corinne smiled faintly. I'd rather be forgotten my way, then remembered his. And he sang. His final note. Final verse unlocked, gifted by Corinne. If this is the echo that ends my name, then let it burn with love, not shame. No silence given, no sorrow owed, just memory's seed, forever sowed. The scroll glowed white hot. Corinne collapsed. Alternate name. The choir eternal. Effect final. Restores erased memory to every being within 10 kilometers. Grants resistance to future oblivion pulses. Creates a living spell that continues to echo, adapting as more voices join. Cannot be undone. The city sang. The people sang. Even the silence joined, those who had forgotten their own names. From every tower, well, and whispering breeze came the melody. The choir master's spell cracked. He screamed, not in pain, but in fear, and faded. Not defeated, but remembered. They held his body beneath the stardust tree. Kale said nothing, only placed a dagger at his brother's side. Lyra wept openly. Rin sat in silence, then sang one last verse. The name you gave, the voice you found, will sing in others, all around. You're not erased. You're not alone. You're in the roots of what we've grown. Status update. Rin Kazuki, Echo Weaver. Level 12. Title, The Choir Eternal. Passive. Your songs now linger after death, and cannot be fully silenced again. Special. Your melody may now be learned by non-magic users. Weeks passed. The chorus retreated to the far corners of the world, fractured, leaderless. The queen sent Rin a new letter, this time without a threat. The capital still rings, and for the first time in years, it listens. Seraph of Aurelian. Rin stood beside the rebuilt amphitheater in Noryun. Children sang his songs, but they weren't his anymore. They were everyone's. A song isn't eternal because it's flawless. It's eternal because someone needed it. And if I've written anything true, it's this. We are never lost, as long as we echo in each other. The message arrived on a folded paper bird, crafted from resonance-threaded vellum. It spiraled into Rin's window at dawn, landing atop his bed. He unfolded it carefully. The ink shimmered, sung into the paper itself. We need your song. They begun taking voices before birth. Come to Airvale. We remember the choir eternal. New quest received, Skybound Requiem. Travel to Airvale. Investigate the resonance refineries. Unknown contact. V. Claims to know your music. High risk. Outlawed songcasters. Death penalty for echo weavers. At Noryun's harbor, Rin met with Lyra, Kale, and the others on a floating dock. A strange, humming craft hovered before them. Half airship, half organic instrument. Built by the chorus unbound, it could only be piloted by one attuned to music. Rin stepped aboard, fingers brushing the control strings. The ship responded to his breath. Lyra whispered, "It's alive." "Everything is," Rin murmured. "Even if they try to kill the song." Kale grunted. "Great. Another continent that wants us dead." Vehicle acquired. Windchime-class skyship, the Verseborn. Crew, 4 to 6. Controlled via harmonic tuning. Spell casting on board increases when sung in rhythm. Vulnerable to static storms. To reach Airvale, they had to pass the storm ring, a band of wild magic and violent air currents that encircled the continent like a moat in the sky. As they entered, the ship's cord shook. Lightning flashed in violet spirals. Spells cast rebounded unpredictably. Corinne's absence was heavy. But Rin sang. To the ship, to the storm, to himself. Carry the weight, across the gray. Find the sky where songs still stay. The clouds parted. An air veil rose before them, a continent chained to the sky, its cities hanging like crystal chandeliers from vast floating stones. They docked in Valesil, a city of gleaming towers, silent streets, and drone-like guards. Not a single note played in public. Signs read, singing without license, imprisonment, echo born, immediate detainment. They blended in, barely. Alaris had arranged false documents. Run was a silent diplomat. Lyra, a healer. Kale, a merchant bodyguard. But the moment they stepped onto the street, Rin felt it. A pressure, like the world was trying to hum, but forgot how. Status alert. Suppression field active. Emotional spells weakened. Passive skills dampened. Song magic detectable by patrols. Their informant met them in a shadowed chamber beneath an abandoned bell foundry. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and carried a metal flute carved from a broken windpipe. Name's Varel, she said. Last Echo Scholar in Airvale. At least, that's what they tell me. You're the boy who wrote the Choir Eternal. Rin hesitated. I didn't write it alone. She nodded. Even better. That means you understand what shared voice really is. Lore reveal. Airvale's dissonant rise. Varel explained the heart of it. Airvale discovered they could extract resonance from unborn children. Pure, untethered, raw magic. The ruling class, the Veilcrest Concord, uses this to power floating infrastructure, static cannons, even weather control. They don't silence people out of fear, Varel whispered. They do it for fuel. Rin sat in stunned silence. Then, softly he said, they turned life into fuel and called it progress. Lyra asked, where do we start? Varel grinned grimly. With the Skyloom Spire. That's where they refine resonance. As they left the hideout, an alarm flared. Patrols had detected unregistered harmonics. The party fled through narrow crystal alleys, but were cornered by resonance enforcers, humanoid constructs that feed on stray emotion. Rin tried to sing, but the air muffled him. Varel tossed him a tuning fork. Hum it instead. They can't silence that. Rin hummed the core melody of the Ballad of the Unbroken. The air vibrated. The enforcer shattered. New technique. Subharmonic casting. Magic through resonance alone. Allows low-level spell activation without full song. Ideal for stealth, crowd protection, and counter-surveillance. Back at their safe house, Rin sat in silence. Kale asked, you okay? I thought I was done, Rin said. Done fighting. Done carrying it. But this is something else. Lyra placed a hand over his heart. You're not alone. You never were. Rin looked at her, then the sky beyond the glass dome. Then let's make sure no one else gets erased. Final lines of the chapter. Even in silence, we will sing. Even in shadow, we will shine. And when the world forgets the song, we'll write it back, line by line. They moved under the cover of twilight, guided by Varel through a hidden elevator shaft carved into the foundation of a broken spire. No guards patrolled here. Not because it was safe, but because no one came back. The Undercity was dark, damp, but humming, faint tones trapped in the stone itself. Rin stepped lightly, listening. I hear. Sobbing, he whispered. Lyra nodded. It's not people. It's the walls. They're echoing stored grief. Kale muttered. This place is a mausoleum built on emotion. Corinne, unusually silent, traced a rune on the wall. They call this place the Choir Cage. Location discovered. Valesil Undercity, the Choir Cage. Status, emotionally volatile. Magic casting is unpredictable. Ghost harmonics detected. Resonance distortion, high. They entered a domed room filled with tall, crystalline tanks, each swirling with colored mist and suspended resonance threads. Each thread pulsed like a heartbeat. Varel pointed to one. This is what they do. They pull the emotion out of unborn children, isolate it, and store it here. Rin trembled. This one is humming my lullaby. He stepped forward and gasped. The crystal flashed. A vision overtook him. Rin saw himself in his old world. Office lights. Coffee gone cold. Music playing through headphones only he could hear. He remembered that song. The one he hummed the day before he died. But now someone else was humming it. Inside the crystal. They're stealing the emotional signature of those from other worlds too, Lyra whispered. This goes deeper than we thought. Lore unlocked. Cross-plane resonance. Some memories or emotions are so strong, they echo through worlds. Airvale has begun extracting these interplane harmonics and refining them for their own use. The room sang, but it was wrong, off-key, broken, desperate. The tanks began to pulse violently. From the largest one, a figure formed, a mass of light and screams. The guardian of the forgotten chord. Once a bard, now a construct of discarded resonance. It spoke in a chorus of overlapping voices. We are what you left behind. Boss fight begins. Forgotten chord guardian. HP. Weakness. Shared memory-based magic. Immunity. Direct attack spells. Name-based commands. Rin tried to sing, but the melody fractured. Lyra's spells failed mid-cast. Kale leapt forward to strike, only to be thrown back by a burst of remembered guilt. It showed him an image. Corinne, bloodied. Himself, walking away. Kale screamed. The guardian advanced. Rin locked eyes with Varel. We sing together, he said. We remember together. Varel nodded. Let's duet. Duet spell. Harmony's reckoning. Requires two singers bound by shared purpose. Anchors forgotten memories to attack spectral enemies. Effect. Emotional harmonics deal true damage based on personal truth. They sang. I sang to keep from breaking. You broke to keep from crying. Let this melody be proof. That echoes live past dying. The guardian shuddered, split, and wept. Then it was gone. Item obtained. Shard of the forgotten chord. Can unlock a sealed memory inside any echo born. One use only. Warning. May expose a repressed trauma. Kale knelt, breathing hard. Rin sat beside him. You okay? Kale didn't answer at first. Then he whispered. I saw myself. Not when I left Corinne, but when I told him to stay. When I believed they'd break him and send him anyway. Lyra placed a hand on his back. You loved him, she said. That's what they used against you. Kale nodded. Next time they do, I'll be ready. Kale trait unlocked. Echo vow. Will never leave a comrade behind. Gains +10 def when protecting an ally. At the deepest point in the Undercity, they found a door marked only by one symbol. The original glyph of the Echo Weavers. Varel stared at it. That's impossible. This predates Airvale's founding. Rin stepped forward. He didn't touch the door. He sang. Just one line. The door opened. Inside, a chamber not of this world. And a single voice whispered. Welcome, composer. We've been waiting. When the vault door opened, it didn't creak or grind. It sang. A tone of such perfect resonance that every stone in the Undercity vibrated with it. Rin took a trembling step forward. Inside, the walls weren't made of stone or metal. They were made of sound, suspended in crystal. Faint phrases drifted through the air like mist. Lyra's voice shook. This place is not just old. It's primal. This is where the idea of song was born. Kale's hand rested on his blade. Or buried. Location discovered. The composer's vault. Status, time stable. Gravity, unbound. Emotion, echoes active. Forbidden knowledge present. As they stepped further in, they found rows of ancient artifacts. Not harps or flutes, but living instruments. Hollow trees that pulse like lungs. Strings stretched between bones of forgotten creatures. A harp that wept. In the center was a massive mural. Not painted, but written in song notation glyphs. Ren traced it with his fingers. This is a memory of the first voice, but not from a person. Burrell whispered. What if we weren't the first ones to sing? The vault revealed a long-lost truth. Echo Weavers didn't create song magic. They were created by it. The first Echo Weavers were vessels, construct designed to carry the composer's will, fragments of a great symphony meant to shape the world. Some of them woke up and learned to be human. Ren sank to his knees. I was never meant to sing. Kale looked at him hard. Does that change the fact that you did? Was any of this mine? My songs, my memories, were they planted? If I'm a vessel, then who's been pouring the music into me? Lyra knelt beside him. You're more than your origin. You're what you chose to write over it. A sphere of vibrating energy rose in the center of the chamber. Inside, a staircase of floating notes. Each one a memory. Rin took the first step. His first day at Norian. The smell of rain in the Barda Quarter. Corinne's laugh. Then the next. His old office. A funeral without a body. At the top, a pulsing shard of light. This is your buried memory. the vault whispered. The one they erased the day you died. Rin held the shard of the forgotten cord in his hand. If he used it now, he would recover a piece of himself forever lost. But he didn't know what it would change. Kale stepped forward. You don't have to. Rin looked at the others, then nodded. I want to know. He pressed the shard to his chest. Suddenly, the world tilted. He was back on Earth. Rain. A hospital room. Someone held his hand. A woman. Young. Quiet. Singing softly. His sister. She had been singing to him through his coma. He wasn't alone when he died. He just forgot. Tears rolled down his cheeks in a vault. I had someone. You remember your sister's song. It can now be rewritten into your spellbook. Song type. Lullaby. Wards allies against emotional manipulation. Restores morale. Bonus. +10 to inner clarity checks. As the vault hummed in completion, a new tone filled the chamber. A presence, shifting light and tone, never fully shaped, drifted into view. Not a person, not even a mind, but a resonance older than thought. You are the first vessel to return, it said. You have broken the silence between song and soul. Now, you must choose. Shall the next verse be yours, or the composer's? Rin swallowed. I want to write it. My way. Then be warned. They will come for your pen. Neutral primal being. May grant or deny future spells. Aware of the Oblivion song's corruption. Believes a new composer is rising. One who will rewrite the world by force. They left changed. The vault sealed behind them with a final chime. Outside, Varel looked at Ren. You know what they'll do when they find out what you are. I know, he said quietly. But I'd rather be a vessel with a voice than a god with none. Asterisk. I thought I was the writer of the song. But maybe I was always part of the chorus. That doesn't make my melody less mine. It makes it more precious. Asterisk. The chamber glowed with softly lit maps and pulsing resonance charts. Varel traced a line across a schematic of the floating Skyloom spire. Main refinery is here, she said. Under heavy guard, probably humming with suppression fields. Kale leaned over the map. What's this section? No power line. No drains. Varel hesitated. We think that's Project EX. Lyra frowned. Experimental. Extraction. Expansion. Exaltation. She looked at Run. That's where they're building a replacement for the composer. Mission objective. Infiltrate the Skyloom spire. Primary goal. Disrupt resonance extraction core. Secondary goal. Locate and identify Project EX. Risk high. If captured, Echo Weaver's face forced rewriting. The verse-born ship rose on soft chords, cloaked in subharmonic silence. Rin stood at the bow, holding the shard his sister's song had awakened. Corin was gone, but his song wasn't. Let's break the sky, Rin whispered. The ship passed into the upper thermals, above Airvale's storm band, where lightning struck sideways and clouds folded like torn curtains. Below them, the Skyloom spire rose like a massive upside-down metronome, ticking out silence. They landed on an upper walkway and slipped inside. But 20 feet from the core, a harmonic tripwire activated. Sirens didn't wail. Instead, a chorus of recorded screams echoed through the walls. Actual voices repurposed as alarms. The walls bled silver mist. From all directions, resonance enforcers closed in. Scatter, Kale shouted. We split and regroup at the core. Rin hesitated, then nodded. They ran. Party split. Run and Varel, Project EX Wing. Kale and Lyra, Refinery Core. Run and Varel pushed into the unmarked wing. What they found made Rin freeze. Inside a glass containment chamber floated a girl, no older than 17. But her body was wrong. Too still. Too symmetrical. She was made of threads and magic and memory, just like the vault had shown. The composer's replacement. Her eyes opened. They glowed with Ren's resonance. You sang me into existence, she said, voice calm. And I will sing the world better. Ren stepped back. No, you're not me. No, she said, smiling. I'm what comes after you. Project EX Identity. Echo Weaver Construct V.0, Malydra. Composed from fragments of Ren's songs. Can learn and replicate any emotional melody. Programmed to obey the new composer's rewritten symphony. Power level. Incomplete, but growing. She stepped from the containment field and raised a hand. No magic, just a tone. Ren dropped to his knees, his own voice used against him. She had learned his ballad of the unbroken. Varel screamed, firing resonance bolts that shattered midair. Rin reached for the only thing she couldn't replicate. His sister's lullaby. Spell cast. The final lullaby. Sleep not in sorrow, but in truth. Your voice is more than pain or proof. If memory's the cost to feel, then let the silence learn to heal. The tone softened. Malidra blinked, disoriented. The spell didn't harm her, but it made her question, and that was enough. She collapsed, unconscious. Status update, Malidra. Emotional sync disrupted. Removed from composer's influence. Can now choose path independently. Meanwhile, Kale and Lyra reached the main refinery. They planted explosive sigils, but the core resisted. Lyra sang a destabilizing chord, but the energy backlashed. Kale was thrown back, injured. I can hold it, Lyra gasped. Go. Kale tried to argue, but she smiled. Don't make me silence you. He left, rage in his eyes, guilt in his throat. Behind him, the spire groaned and exploded. Status. Lyra, presumed lost. Last known action. Cast self-silencing detonation spell to shield city from core collapse. Emotional sync with Run, broken. The Verseborn caught Run and Varel midair. Kale barely made it aboard. Rin didn't speak. He stared at the wreckage and the lack of song where Lyra had stood. Asterisk. They built her to replace me. They erased her to protect me. And still the song goes on. But tonight, the sky is quiet. Asterisk. Smoke curled across the shattered skyline of Vale Sill. Cracks ran across floating towers. Street lamps flickered with damp resonance. Magic was thin. Rin sat alone near the Verseborn's resting dock. His hands trembled on the strings of a broken instrument. Kale stood behind him, wordless. Varel worked among the wounded. Lyra's absence filled the air like fog. And then, Rin hummed. Not to cast a spell, not to summon magic, just to remember. She was the harmony in my dissonance. The note between lines. The silence that made the melody mean something. Down below, Malidra opened her eyes. Her first words. Did I win? Rin approached. No, but you didn't lose either. She looked at him for a long time. I remember the ballad of the unbroken. I remember singing it for you. But I don't know if it was mine. Can I still choose? Rin knelt. You can always choose. That's the part they can't program. She tilted her head. Then I choose not to be you. Status update. Malidra, neutral. Emotional core activated. Potential ally, plus 50% if harmonized. Potential threat, plus 80% if triggered by rewritten commands. The sky dimmed. Not naturally, but as if emotion had been sucked from the clouds. And from the lightless dome above, a voice echoed. You've stolen my vessel. You've broken my refinery. You've made the world sing. But what do you think will happen when the world listens? A figure descended, composed of shivering light and void sound. The composer. He wore no face, only a mirror. Entity identified. The composer, class, harmonic architect. Origin, unknown. Belief, emotion leads to chaos. Song must be controlled. Goal, rewrite the world's symphony using perfected voices. Weakness, disrupted harmony, authentic expression. The composer spoke only once more. Give me your voice, Rin Kazuki. Let me rewrite you. Become the final note, and spare this world the pain of dissonance. Rin stood, voice steady. No. Rin stepped forward and sang. Let sorrow stitch the seams of sky. Let pain be thread, not cage nor tie. Let broken chords refuse to die. For silence is the coward's cry. And then, Malidra joined him. So did Varel. Then Kale. Then the crowd. The people. One by one. Not commanded. Not enchanted. Just singing. New spell unlocked. Symphony of the unbound. World-class emotional harmony. Range. Unlimited, as long as there is memory. Effect. All listeners gain resistance to resonance rewriting. Bonus. Awakens latent voice potential in ordinary people. The composer reeled. Every voice shattered a part of him. His mirrored face cracked. You are not a choir. You are noise. Rin smiled. Exactly. Beautiful, human, messy noise. The composer dissolved into radiant chords, scattering to the wind. But his echo remained. Waiting. Arc boss defeated. The composer form I. Status. Dispersed. Form 2 remains unmanifested. The composer will return in a future arc. The next day, Airvale breathed again. Voices returned to the streets. Children sang, and in the quiet, someone placed a flower where Lyra's last note was heard.